if it feels a little strange to have creators walking around with television producers and big studios and big public service media companies going on stage and talking about case studies with YouTube, the description of it is the intersection of the creator economy and mainstream media. That's what you're watching happening here in Cannes this week at MIPCOM. You can see the conversations happening on stage. You can see the conversations happening in the cafes, in the suites, and everywhere else, where interesting deals are being made. And what I'm hoping to do over the next hour or so is give you live case studies of things that are happening. First of all, show you the data that shows what's happening with your audiences. Talk about where your audiences are going and where you need to go to meet the next generation of audiences, or generations of audience. And then show you some case studies that are happening right around us here at MIPCOM and elsewhere in the marketplace. And then bring a live case study on stage to show you as well. Does that sound okay? Yeah. You sure?
Yeah.
So, one of the most important things to know about what's happening in the media universe right now and what the collision of these two ecosystems means is that we are now solely in a user-centric era. YouTube is TV. The user is in complete control. If these two things aren't okay with you, you may want to leave now. These are intrinsically truisms because the consumer has defined them that way. The consumer now, it's never been easier to sign up or cancel for a service. The consumer now uses big tech to dominate everything. Who here has a smartphone? Raise your hand. Who here is their smartphone the first thing they touch in the morning? Raise your hand. Who here is their smartphone? Be honest. Who here is their smartphone the last thing they touch at night? Sorry for your significant others. But it is, it's the remote big tech device is the remote control of our lives, and especially our media suite of services. Even if you're not watching on a phone, you're controlling what you consume with that remote control. And it's never been easier to sign up nor cancel a service at this moment in time. So the first thing you need to know is we are in a user-controlled era. It's not, you don't get to define what television is, you don't get to define what's on. As Pedro Pina said on stage on Monday, it is not a push era anymore. It is a pull era, and you have to get used to it. The bad news is commissioners of content are commissioning less. The bad news is we're about to have fewer buyers than we have today. The good news is there are millions of new buyers ready to consume your content. Look, they're called the people of Earth. And if you can learn how to go directly to them and distribute directly to them, not always, not singularly, but in addition to what you're doing, then you will have a right to win, because the professional producers, publishers, and platforms that are at this conference, if they so choose to lean into, right now, the crossroads of mainstream media and the creator economy, if here in force, right? But that's because the professional producers, studios, and platforms at this conference have seeded those platforms solely to creatives. That's why they are so dominant there. The majority, creator economy is the fastest growing segment of the media economy. The majority of growth on the creator economy in the next 5 years is going to come from big studios and professional producers taking their libraries and producing originals for creator platforms. That's where, and it's going to be a rocket ship. When the Disneys and the Warners lean into this creator economy as fully as they should, it's going to change everything. So you need to be prepared for it. And yes, I talk a lot about YouTube. I get it. I'm sorry. But YouTube is the first social video platform that's come to your television set. It will definitely not be the, depends on what you take away from this presentation, I guess. I'm going to move on. So the biggest thing to know about the user-centric era is who your users are and how they differentiate their media consumption. Yes, the generation or the demographics have defined things up until this moment in time, but I think demographics are a vanity metric of the last era. But importantly, nearly 2/3 of the planet Earth are now under the age of 40. That is something to know. The other thing to know is how these demographics see the world. Because demographics will never age. 18 to 49 will always be 18 to 49. But generations do age. Millennials are now 45. Gen Z are now 30. They are not kids, they're having kids. Or if you're in Italy, not having kids. It's a generational birth rate, sorry. And these are the first generations, Generation Z, Millennials, Generation A, that grew up with supercomputers in their pockets, grew up entirely online and on social media. Grew up in an era where they get more news from social media than the television or anywhere else. They don't just see the world differently, they live in a completely different world. And they are the majority of consumers on the planet Earth for a very long period of time. 70% of the world's population are now millennials and younger. 70% of the audience that is available to you right now are millennials or younger. In the US, it's a little bit less of a tilt that way, but it's still 58%. In Europe, which is super fucking old, it's still the majority of people are millennials and younger. And again, remember, millennials are turning 45, so they're now at the heart and soul. Millennials and Gen Z have the 18 to 49 demographic. So their behaviors, which will not automatically convert to broadcast the way they did to coffee and beer, their habits are going to come with them and influence the rest of society as well. But the workforce, the buyers, the heads of households, and the parents are majority Gen Z and millennials from this point forward, no matter where you live. And so these are your most important consumers. That's the first thing to understand about the media universe. The second thing to understand is that millennials and younger, and Xers and older, live in two distinctly different media ecosystems. They watch things different, they listen to things different, they sometimes watch the same content, but very differently on very different platforms. That's something to pay attention to. The key here to succeed in this new era, where the intersection of creator economy and mainstream economy are now the new normal, is to avoid the fear of finding out. Look at the data, look where the audience is going. Don't tell me YouTube is not television unless you've looked at the data and looked at how much data YouTube is being watched on television. Or, if you do have an argument for linear television, bring that data to the table as well, because there is a long, good argument for linear television, for FAST, and for pay TV as well. Crucially though, the data to not avoid right now is that we are in a turnpocalypse. Consumers are canceling media at a very fast clip. They have a lot of media sources, but they're also canceling them often. They're using a half an hour less media in the last year per day, per consumer. They're cutting back on television services. And crucially, they're cutting back on television services repeatedly, not just in total television services, but also in pay TV and in SVOD as well. Who here has signed up for a premium streaming service in the last year, watched the hell out of something, and then canceled before the next billing cycle? Raise your hand high if you've done it. It's actually a lower percentage than usual, but you are the churnpocalypse. You represent the churn. And by the way, this pay TV churn, this is the United States. This is happening in every territory around the planet Earth right now. So you're watching the economics of our television business change right in front of your faces. And then when you look at what's being watched on television, again, have the argument with me about formats and platforms and audiences and where they watch, but then look at the data and let's talk about where the viewing and where the audience is actually going. This is August, but if you looked at July, it's very similar. Looked at June, it's very similar. YouTube is the #1 channel on television in the United States. That's impressive, right? But when you look at this chart, remember what this number represents. That's YouTube bigger than all of Disney, ABC, Hulu, Disney+, ESPN. That's YouTube bigger than all of NBCU and all their cable channels before they get divorced. That's YouTube bigger than Fox. That's Netflix also bigger than those others as well. YouTube is not just the biggest channel, it's eclipsing all usage on other corporately put out media on television. Everyone loves to talk about how dominant Netflix is. Netflix's usage over the last couple of years has been relatively flat in many territories around the world, while YouTube's continues to climb. This is on TV. By the way, both of these numbers don't include tablets or phones. This is television usage. This is also not YouTube TV. There's another of the numbers, but I can talk about that another time. This is July's number. But when you look here, YouTube is now almost as large as broadcast. By the way, FAST is also as big as Netflix, something that gets underreported a little bit. Free is a dominant watch case on TVs right now. By this time next year, YouTube will be as big on the television set as all broadcasts combined in the United States. Can someone tell me if YouTube is television or not? And if you should be there or not with your content? Because they're not making television, they're distributing or not your content, other people's content, OPC, as they used to say. Most of the content being watched on YouTube is in the United States on TV, increasingly around the rest of the world on TV. Almost half of YouTube in the UK is now watched on television. And a good deal of it, if not most of it, all the time is long form, longer than 30 minutes. This is proper television. Frontline, a great documentary series in the United States on PBS, puts every episode of its series, of its feature-long documentaries on YouTube simultaneously with PBS. It doubles the audience on YouTube. And it's 2 generations, maybe 3 generations younger. Now, what you need to know about YouTube is that there are 4.6 million channels, and the top 20% get 98% of usage. So it's a hard slog. It's not easy, which is why I'm going to introduce someone to you a little later, and you'll see some stuff from some people in this presentation about helping you distribute your stuff. This is not easy. This is not just throw this shit up on the internet and it works. What's fascinating is within this top 20%, there's nearly 1 million channels. Still 1 million channels. So it's 1 million inside 4.6. What are the 3 most important words in real estate?
Location, location,
location, location, location. The 3 most important words in media from this point forward are fragmentation, fragmentation, fragmentation. Infinite fragmentation all the time. Yes, there are millions of new buyers, but the people of Earth. Also, meet your new competition. The people of Earth. You are competing against literally everyone. And that kind of level of fragmentation is both a huge burden and challenge, but at the same time, it's why you can win. You produce great content all the time, at a higher cadence, at a higher quality than CreatorDom has traditionally done. That's not what they do necessarily. So your presence there will be noticed by the algorithm, which is the opinion of the people. But you have to choose to enter it and enter it with eyes wide open and understand it's going to be a fucking slog. But if you can get there and meet your audience where they're watching, there's money to be made there. If you're not comfortable with this, again, this doesn't have walls, so you can leave. You do have to understand that the 2 generational blocks, millennials and younger and Xers and older, watch very differently. And all the data that you look at shows it in stark relief. You can see the divide here between millennials and younger, Netflix and younger, and magazines and older. Look at the the median age of primetime television and cable news. It's for those in the back that can't see it, it says Methuselah. And this divide shows itself wherever you go. When you look at who's most likely to pay for television in the US, yes, obviously it goes down younger in age, but look where it drops, right at the dividing line between millennials and Xers. When you go to local news by age, you can see exactly where the local news usage drops below a half, and you can see where exactly in the same age bracket, millennials to Xers, the usage for local news, this is local news, online increases. When you go to Canada, it's the same thing. When you go to Europe and you look at daily usage, 3 hours or more of social media, you can see the huge leap from Gen X to millennials. It's a big leap too to Gen Z, but the biggest jump is from Gen X to millennials. And then when you look at television in the UK, this is full year usage in the UK. This is people 35 plus, all people 35 plus, on 4 screens in the home of television viewing. You can see YouTube is number 3. Proof in the pudding that millennials are now 45, and they're a big chunk of this demographic. But you can see the public service broadcasters still hold a commanding lead of usage in this market. This is people over 35. Now look at people under 35. That's the right reaction. And you can see it's just 2 different ecosystems. And this is a market with tons of free television. Tons of free television. By the way, this is Generation Ed. So YouTube is by far and away the #1 kids channel, but it is also increasingly the #1 stop for families when they turn on the television. Who here has watched YouTube on television in the last year? Raise your hand. For this older group, that's pretty. And by the way, when you look at usage, including very conservative, older countries, meaning the demographics are older there, with a long history and current history of free over-the-air television, you can see the biggest use case is both streaming and traditional television combined. But when you look at the generational split, in Spain, you can see the divide where streaming really takes off, the divide between millennials and Gen Xers. So this repeats itself wherever you go. Here's Australia, it happens again. I can pull up these numbers wherever I go. It's a magic trick that I do. That's because there are now 1 billion hours of YouTube watched on television every single day. Who here has watched a podcast on YouTube? Raise your hand. Right, it's the #1 podcast platform. Who here has watched a podcast on TV on YouTube? Raise your hand. That's a talk show, right? And this is now an increasing use case here. Now, what I'm going to show you, and by the way, this is what happens when traditional media embraces creator media. ABC, Jimmy Kimmel famously was banned and then came back to ABC. He had his biggest audience in a decade, a little more than 6 million people. On YouTube, in day one, he had 17 million people. Day one. And this is where the two meet. Like, this earns a lot of money, and this earned a lot of reputation. When big media leans into the creator economy, they succeed. When they really do it with intention and a concerted effort, they do succeed. The creators are the biggest voices in culture right now. They are the new Hollywood, to quote Neil Mohan, the CEO of YouTube. And that's why everybody has a fast strategy right now. Has a creator strategy right now. All the fast platforms are announcing theirs. This guy's actually in the room right now. Netflix will tell you that YouTube is for wasting time, and then they go buy every single creator on YouTube for their platform. And everybody's paying creators. They're falling over themselves to pay the Paul brothers and Kill Tony for creator content. The cool key here is when creator economy and mainstream media do intersect, like ITV and BBC Studios, you see magical things happen. When you saw this happen in France with M2K and Inox biggest creator in France, partnering with one of the best film distributors in France for a documentary about him climbing Mount Everest. They released it in movie theaters and sold 300,000 tickets just in France, and then 10 million people watched it on YouTube the next week. This is the marriage between creator and mainstream media. But it also means you have to change the way you look at production. Not everything you do is made for broadcast television in the truest definition anymore. You have to think about interloping between screens. You have to think about starting out at low budgets to build audience and then moving to new platforms with that IP. This is Darman, the largest scripted creator in the world, talking about just that.
If you look at a traditional studio who's trying to create for YouTube, they come in thinking 6 to 7 figure budgets per episode, where it's like, no, you have to spend, somewhere around $1,000 per minute to create scripted content, not 10,000 or even 100,000 per minute that Hollywood is used to. So it's about staying scrappy and also getting formats that get a lot of views, ideally cross-platform.
Today, people say, well, people
This is Fenton Bailey from World of Wonder, who makes RuPaul's Drag Race, talking about how to distribute a market to audiences today.
Today, people say, well, people don't watch full shows, they only watch clips. Well, the clips are the show, and the show is the clips. The promotion is the show, and the show is the promotion. It's all one thing, rather than separate silos of, well, this is marketing and promotion. This is the show. It's all kind of a piece, and I do think that is a piece of takeaway advice for anyone doing anything. It's like, you can't just be a director, you can't just be a writer, you have to be all of those things. You have to think perhaps more like a drag queen. You need to find your audience, you need to curate your audience, nurture your audience, and be continually reinventing the way you engage them, because that's the key.
Fandom is really key. No matter where your show winds up, on a traditional broadcast or on a pay TV platform, on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram, if you can't fan your own fandom, you will fail. World of Wonder has been fanning their fandom for RuPaul for almost 20 years, since before social media was a thing. And they are a great lesson to take. They now run their own direct-to-consumer pay service. A small production company that does quite well for themselves. When you look at other examples of big publishers and other big studios and other big platforms going the creator route, you can see success. I helped convince Channel 4 to lean into YouTube with the long-form premium content. They watched their content skyrocket. They watched the revenue that they sold on the platform nearly double, and it keeps going up from there. This is Matt Risley, who led that charge, is now running marketing for National Theatre. Talk about that.
So we had a year of like testing and learning, putting different types of content out. We understood pretty quickly that longer form content, so 15, 20 minute plus, that was getting more reach than other content on a day-to-day. It was monetizing better.
So test and learn. Test and learn. I hear this a lot. Well, what happens if we put this up there and then this happens? And then I say, take it down. Take it down. Stop doing it. But test and learn is a key element that small companies and large need to get okay with at this moment in time if they're going to survive and thrive. That was how we got past it at Channel 4. Same thing at CBC, where the myth internally there was, well, it will cannibalize from our app and it will cannibalize from broadcast, which a lot of producers will hear from their broadcast partners as well. We put too much content on YouTube, it'll cannibalize from our app usage and it'll cannibalize from our broadcast. You can see their channel usage doubled, their revenue that they sold went up, and this is Paul McGrath who led that charge, talking about the cannibalization from YouTube because of this.
If the hypothesis is cannibalization, you would expect that when you publish it on a different platform like YouTube, it would take away from the consumption you get on your streaming service. The net result that we found from studying that was the opposite. It actually increased the engagement on our streaming service from the date it was published on YouTube.
So these things are additive. First of all, you need to understand that when they did this, the audience on YouTube was a generation younger than the app audience, a whole generation, and 2 generations younger than broadcast. This was pretty much the same on CBC. And everywhere we do this experiment with partners, this is what happens. They find entirely new audiences you aren't getting. A lot of you have convinced yourself that your audiences are old because you're playing on exclusively X and Boomer platforms. Your audiences aren't old, your platforms are. And those audiences are still valuable, but there are whole new audiences out there and new revenues, additive revenues that you're not getting to get.
This example, I think.
But this is a good example of a partner who helps other producers and publishers increase their usage and money on social video.
This example I think that you're going to pull up is a broadcast show that started out initially with pretty tepid ratings. They were having higher expectations. It's sort of on the level of like a This Is Us. It's like a big family drama. And at the start, as I mentioned, the ratings were pretty modest, but they started a YouTube strategy of posting it, next day. And literally over the last few months, as the season has progressed, the ratings of that show have increased as the YouTube audience has been consuming it. And keep in mind, of course, it's a younger audience on YouTube that's viewing this. And so now it's essentially the #1 show in Turkey.
There are examples all over the world that show the same exact thing. That will increase the usage. It will increase revenues for you day one as you get more audience, and it will increase usage on other platforms. Bluey is another one of these. #1 streamed show, I think, on the planet Earth. #1 kids show on the planet Earth, both on YouTube and on Disney+. This is Nick Shear, who runs their business development there, talking about how they approached social video as a part of their overall television strategy.
At the beginning, we just put a few clips on YouTube, we saw what happened, we saw, what audiences were doing, and then we started to build out a range of content. And it's not just show content, we've gone a lot into originals with Bluey, so we've done great stuff like...
So just bespoke stuff that's on your social videos.
Exactly. That's not there, and then actually what's happened with Bluey, which has been really interesting, is some of the digital first content has then sold back into broadcasters.
If you build a big enough fandom, what'll happen is they'll come knocking on your door, and because you have a marketing install base to bring with you, they will pay you more for it as a result. There are people who buy content in this room who are now nodding, who I won't point out. But that is the absolute truth. Look at Darman's recent deal on Fast. Look at Try Guys and a whole bunch of other Fast deals that are being made by creators because they bring a marketable audience. But crucially, the money to be made off of YouTube is not just from advertising, it's about creating a flywheel to community there. This is what ITV talks about. This is BBC's views. You can see it's mostly outside of the UK. They're building a global audience, and that's the rich byproduct of leaning into the creator economy. This is Reese Perry from ITV talking about their experience with Levine.
So we go and find these audiences, and the monetization model mostly for social is YouTube. So we partner into all sorts of different social medias, but YouTube is the one that started delivering us meaningful money. So we started to optimize the channels better, we started to curate content differently, so we've got lots of channels around The Voice, Hell's Kitchen channels, we've got the Graham Norton Show, we've got
Ripple channels for each one of these pieces of content. And they have gotten so good at this now, they're now doing this for other people, as are BBC Studios. So if the big, creaky public service media companies, granted it's their commercial arm, but these are the most traditional media companies on the face of the earth, if they can learn how to lean into the rules of the creator economy and focus on fandom, literally any companies on earth can. They're bigger and harder to turn. Your production companies, your smaller producing houses are not too big to turn. And it is the proper moment to lean into this stuff. There is more available to you than there ever has been. This is creator economy. It is currently, I just mapped it last week, and these are the biggest platforms. You'll see the biggest creators on the platforms. You'll see that this is dominated by creators, and there's a number of different reasons for that. But you look, it's also dominated often by sports teams, showing you how fandom can be created around intellectual property, not just individuals. We also measure engagement quality on here. Not just reach, not just the biggest by follower count, but new metrics around affinity. And that's because I feel like we are now moving into an affinity economy. That's where the creator economy and the mainstream media meet, in the affinity economy, where fandom is not just measured, but it is also valued. This is the head of digital studios for BBC Studios, Jasmine Dawson, talking about that.
I think KPIs, which I know you talk about a lot, is also a really same, absolute data geek, and I think moving away from views, which we do incredibly well with, 14 billion views last year, but views are quite a vanity metric at this point. How do you measure a view? What's the view the same? And moving more to that depth of engagement and thinking about watch time, and also how is our audience engaging with us? How do we actually measure that fandom? Because just because you read a piece of content doesn't make you a fan.
What you'll see on that creator ecosphere map is there are a lot of empty calories, a lot of big follower counts that don't have engagement. That's because they're not fans, they're followers, and there's a big difference. I do think we have to move to a different definition of KPI, the key passion metrics, like fandom, like engagement, like how quickly do they go from watching your video to buying your t-shirt and wearing it on stage? How much do they talk about you on other social media, like Reddit? These are the new engagement metrics because these are the ones you're actually going to be selling out in the marketplace on a moving forward basis. Can I move an audience over to Netflix and therefore you'll give me a big license fee? Can I move people to click on that store so that you can pay me a brand deal? Can I get more people to watch this so that your branding message is carried within my content? These are now how you're going to have to increasingly operate, and it's not just about getting to mass, it's about getting to engagement. So that's how I see the quality of engagement playing into how you can operate on these platforms. You can see that Jordan the Stallion has a much higher engagement than Comedy Central, or Nickelodeon, or CBC, or ESPN. But Kill Tony, which is on Netflix, and by the way, Top Gear, a BBC Studios title, and BBC Storyworks, and Amelia de Multenberg, who's also on my podcast, The Media Odyssey, that you can subscribe to right now, they all have very high, there are examples of the world's meeting and engagement being fanned. So with that, I want to hand the mic and clicker over to somebody who's a real life case study. YouTube's been on stage the last couple of days. I've been on stage the last couple of days saying, just work with YouTube. And remember, I don't only mean YouTube. I mean TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, which is a big monetization tool that a lot of people sleep on. But social video more widely. I don't always say how to do it, because frankly, I don't actually know how to do it. I know a lot of people who do know how to do it. And they're all out in force at this market. There are really smart motherfuckers walking around Quasette this time who can help you develop this strategy at low or no costs. To be honest with you, one of those motherfuckers is right here. He runs one of the best agencies at this, Totem, and his name is Steve Crombie, and he's super interesting, but he has an accent, so let's welcome his name.
Thank you, sir. Notice that I haven't copied my outfit today, by the way, black t-shirt and pants. No, that's all right. Hello, everybody. My name is Steve Crombie. First of all, I want to acknowledge Evan has done an amazing job in galvanizing the media industry and bringing about this change and doing something really significant. I sort of think he deserves an Emmy. I really like one, so, you know, good time. He doesn't need another one. Okay, so, moving right along. Like, I am here because I love this industry. I'm very passionate about this space and passionate about all the amazing things that you can build. And at this moment in time, this is one of the most extraordinary times to build many wonderful things. And let's see if we can, here we go. So, if YouTube is the new broadcast, what does that mean for a broadcaster on Monday? What are you going to do then? Interesting question. So, I'm the founding CEO of Totem. Totem is basically founded, we help pioneer new models to rapidly scale audience and generate revenue for platforms, creators, and legacy media companies. And so we do this through various features which I'm going to go through later on in this conversation. We started in 2012 when YouTube invited us to help them scale their business across APAC because we're building YouTube channels faster than anybody else in that partnership work. And we've been basically building and operating this space for a very long time. And a lot of changes happened. There's a lot of different cycles that have moved through in this industry leading up to today. And so today is a very exciting time. We've done this across 4 different continents. We've done it for like the Disney of Northern Europe, the Netflix of Bangladesh, a bunch of billionaires in Singapore who are inheriting their parents' businesses, a lot of different religions. We even did it for a living God in India, which was super interesting. But you know, a lot of different spaces we've worked in. So we can bring and map out a lot of different models that have existed in the music industry, in the sports industry, in the education industry, across multiple platforms on YouTube clients. So the first 10 years was focused on designing models for other people. And along the way, we designed models that were worth maybe $10 to $100 million. But the problem is the C-suite of these multi-billion dollar entities at that time were very afraid of how to move, and they took too long to move. And so